Okay, folks, it is 1 o'clock, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. Please stand for O Canada. If we can. Can you get up there? Oh. There it is. Okay, let's make sure that our phones are off or on whatever that mute is. All right. Is there any disclosure, pecuniary interest, or general nature thereof of any item on today's agenda by any member of council? Seeing none, we'll note that. And our business today is a presentation from Lindsay Blair, 2B Development, about housing at the Charlotte Lake School site. So Lindsay, I'll let you introduce your team, and it's turning it right over to you. You've got to push that button, yeah, and pull it right up close to you so that the people who are zooming in can hear what we're saying.
Perfect. Can everyone online hear? Steph, can you give me a volume check? Thumbs up?
Nope.
Steph, can you hear me okay? Thumbs up?
Can you hear me?
Steph, can you hear us? Thumbs up?
You must be looking at a computer.
See you. Yeah,
Hi there.
Sonia, it's working.
I was having audio problems. I had to change a setting on my end as well in order to get it to work. So I had to change a microphone setting on my end, and now it works.
Okay. Sonia, can you tell Steph that setting? I did just receive a note of Tyler trying to enter the Teams meeting. So just maybe if we can flip him a note for the Zoom link.
Yeah, I sent an email. It was only about 1:45 when I sent it,
Okay.
but Tyler and Justin both need the Zoom link because they only had the Teams link. So
Yeah. Did you send it already to them?
I did, but I'll do it again.
Okay. So I thought Chris had done it. Actually, send it to stop.
Mm.
Yeah. Just waiting for.
We can start just because Justin and Tyler do know our team. And it is, I think, being recorded. So my name's Lindsay Blair with 2B Developments with my colleague Nick, who's the senior project manager with our team. And today we're speaking to you all in 3 parts. We're going to do a high-level summary of a previous presentation we've made with respects to the financial feasibility study that we did for the Garrett Street project or Garrett Street property and project. And then we're going to do 2 workshops. And the main objective of doing the workshops in this presentation, I think, is to get into a little bit more deeper details on questions that are being asked about servicing, as well who may also end up being the builder, developer, and those types of scenarios with respects to the possible development on the property. Nick and I are both working on the Verona housing project and have been shepherding that along for the last year and a half, and have quite a bit of experience for the rural development. We do primarily work in rural areas. We do have some urban projects, but across both Ontario and British Columbia, we're supporting a number of rural projects that, have hurdles and challenges related to servicing, capacity, resources, and the ambiguity of, who's actually going to own and operate a project when it comes to using municipal land. So hopefully, the outcome of the presentation is going to either create answers or create better clarity. I suspect we probably would do a summary following this and identify what's likely going to be maybe some pathways. We've created time at the end of the discussion to just have an open discussion on what we've talked about. So we'll go from there. Okay. And I always get nervous sharing things and using technology, so bear with me on this. I think it's this. Okay. So as I said, there's kind of three parts to today's presentation. The first part, I'll be walking us through, first two parts, I'll be walking through using the slideshow. And then Nick's going to be taking everyone through a bit more of an interactive session related to ownership and partnership, etc. So our agenda, we've introduced ourselves, we've talked about the objectives. We're going to go into the preliminary feasibility assessment that's already been done, and then into workshop 1 and workshop 2. So about to-be developments, I think some context is important. We do work with many municipalities, nonprofits, and also private sector clients. We help clients from all stages of development. We generally stay with projects through all stages. And so we understand the benefit and challenges with getting clarity about project particulars at the beginning, and the challenges that come with a project as you progress it through. We have a lot of experience in aligning capital funding for projects as well, and understanding the differences and the nuances between if a municipality is doing it, if a nonprofit's doing it, or private sector. And also the understanding of what municipalities have to go through on a process base. If you do want to give the land to a private developer to build, the RFP process, the procurement process for stuff like that. A full kind of circle, I would say, of services. So for the objectives, we have done a baseline housing financial feasibility assessment, and I'm going to come back to that. We have presented before already, but I'm coming back to it because I want to talk about the factors that impact feasibility, and that really does relate to servicing and also ownership and partnerships. And then we're going to talk about the different servicing pathways and get into just deeper details. Often those conversations are pretty high level, but we want to bring it a little bit deeper to understand the benefits, challenges, etc., depending on what type of proponent pushes the project forward. And then Nick's going to bring us through the session around, owner operator. And, does the municipality have any hand in any of that? Is there a hybrid, etc.? So our preliminary housing and financial feasibility assessment, now I've got the pro forma here with me, and if during the debrief we want to pull that back up, I can definitely pull that back up at the end. At a high level, what we were trying to determine was what could be the number of units to be financially feasible, recognizing the characteristics of the municipality. Those characteristics come right down to a point I remember Fran bringing up, which is just fire protection. We have fire trucks that, can only really go up 2 stories, and we have to kind of consider all these factors when modeling a project. So what we've really modeled is a 2 to 2.5 story project that would have about 24 units. It could have more, but what we wanted to try and do is determine what a break even could be. And so we've incorporated both 1 and 2 bedrooms with affordability rates of $950 to $1,500. for those. And depending on a few factors, the baseline DCR, and I'll describe what a DCR is 1.03 to 1.1. And so always in terms of assessing financial feasibility, the DCR is our driver, debt coverage ratio. So how many dollars of revenue do we have versus dollars of expenses? We want to see a positive number. So we want to see a number that's 1 or more. We ideally want to see a number that's at least 1.1. And for institutional financing, which really comes into play with private sector, they need to see a number that's 1.2. So that's often why rental rates are getting bumped up, is to satisfy that requirement. And lastly, one aspect that we incorporated into our modeling for the project when we did the feasibility assessment is just reasonability. We bring that lens to most of our projects. Is it reasonable? Is this actually reality? You know, we don't want to be proposing densities and development that really would have no pathway, whether it's a private developer, nonprofit, or municipality. Is the money required to build this reasonable for someone to access, for proponent to access to make this possible? Some of the assumptions, so we have a very integrated Excel sheet, and there's some assumptions that we pulled out of it. So what we do is we put together a floor plan based off of, you know, ranges of square footages. And then we determine how many of those units we think could work on a footprint. And then we break them down in terms of the affordability. And we can go into more about the affordability in the debrief. But what we're using for affordability are targets given to us by Build Canada Homes, which is now our primary funder for these types of projects. So we benchmark against that. And we have all units being put under the moderate affordability column. And so that's anywhere from 50 to 75% of their range that they've given us. And that's this $947 and $1,500 that we're using right now. So yes, for the most part. And when I say the most part, because that's a pretty ambiguous answer, is except hydro. But hydro would be, you know, still probably $75 to $100 a month from what I'm seeing, because it's both your heat and your usage. But we have most buildings are using at least a 32 to 48% energy reduction modeling, just based off the building components now. So there's some good retention. But I still think that the tenants will probably have to pay that. The other complication we come across with hydro and why we do choose to not incorporate utilities is some tenants who get the rebate with Hydro One need to have the Hydro One bill. And so we do model it to be like sub-metering provided by them. So yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. They are heated electrically.
Yeah. Yes. And so, you know, there's several tabs in this Performa Excel sheet, and it kind of incorporates everything into a summary page. So the first tab of our Performa is this tab, and it summarizes everything. So it summarizes how we're calculating the mortgage debt. It summarizes how we're calculating total project cost, breaking that project cost down by land, hard costs, and soft costs. Those costs that you see there have contingencies included with them too. And then it tells us, you know, what we need to find in terms of funding, whether it's whomever the proponent may be. In this scenario, this could be a private sector proponent under the apartment loan construction program, bringing 10% equity to the table. And then we put in a grant contribution of 15%. Most projects are trying to get at least over 20%, so it's below. And then a 76% repayable loan, which is a reasonable loan to value for a project. Right now, it's showing a debt service ratio of 1.03. Normally, our DCRs actually start lower at the beginning of a project. And as you kind of start to validate your numbers, that's when you end up seeing some savings on your costs. But it's at 1.03 right now. And that's based off of a qualifying mortgage rate. So the mortgage rate is 100 basis point higher when we put it down to what the rates are right now, 3.85 about, and that's with the funders, not really institutional. It brings it up to 1.15. So we can go through that, but that's the difference that 100 basis points makes on the project. So debt coverage ratio, that's that bottom line there. That's literally when Nick and I are doing these things, we just look right there and go, what does it look like? When we build out these sheets, we try not to even look at the main page. We just put in all the information as honestly as we can, and then we go to it and see what's happening. So we've got a 1.03 right now. And just as an example, this is kind of just outlining how the DCR works. So what 1.03 tells us is for every dollar of expenses, we have 1.03 net revenue dollars, so after expenses available to pay. It's on the low side, like we would want to see that at least at 1.1 right now. Okay, so before moving into the workshop, I do want to just ask if there's any questions that come to mind immediately before going into servicing. We can do more debrief at the end too and save all of our questions until then. So the purpose of this first workshop, when we are modeling the project through that pro forma, the unknowns right now are both ownership and how that ties into servicing and what we're trying to get out of this project. So is this parcel one that we want to see have just housing built on? And is that all we care about? Or are we wanting it to be utilized for other purposes for the municipality's benefit, such as a water system or a sewage system? And those factors really dictate some of the factors that we're using in the pro forma and what might happen. And so when it comes to wastewater and servicing, we like to go right to the baseline and just describing kind of the ways we have to think about it as it relates to a project when a municipality owns that land. Because a municipality owning land to develop is much different than a private sector party or a nonprofit party owning that land. And how servicing may be dealt with when there isn't a full municipal service system available to it. This is my first time running this presentation, so just bear with me on this. I think many people, through the work that both FMS is doing and also the work that the Verona project and the Township of South Frontenac is doing, there is probably a general understanding of the types of servicing, but I'll still go through them. I think I might even have the wrong slide up in terms I've got CMHC and other sources here, so just ignore that. We have full and centralized services. So what that means is obviously the municipality is providing full municipal services through its boundary to individual property owners within that boundary. And then we have decentralized services in which not the whole boundary is being serviced, but a cluster, and the municipality still owns and operates it. And then we have private services in which there's the services on one property owner's property is servicing just that building. Building type and occupancy type does not dictate the type of servicing. So systems that municipalities operate and manage are full centralized services and decentralized services. They actually also manage private services if they have an individual property on it too. And then systems that private landowners manage, I apologize to everyone. I think I have the wrong slide up. I did say I wasn't good with technology, so I'm now having to go off the tongue here. Private systems are ones that individual property owners manage and operate, which again could also be municipalities and nonprofits. So this is an overview. If we look at these squares, in my opinion, are a good representation of the three scenarios. So this green square, if you think of the borders of the green square, is the borders of a municipality, the boundary. And everything in the green square is serviced and operated by municipality. Now, it could be both, or it could be, just water or septic, but the entire boundary. The middle square, we have half of it, but not all of it. And that's kind of a cluster approach. So it's not the full municipality, full municipal boundary being provided services. some of it, not all of it. And then we have the last square where we have no dark green. And that is fully private systems within a municipality. So nothing within the municipality's boundary is provided through full municipal service systems. Verona is an example. Sydenham is an example of the middle one. They have a water tower that services most of the area, but not the entire boundary of Sydenham. So that's kind of an example there. This middle one represents both full and decentralized in some aspects, but more decentralized, I would say. So bear with me. We've got our full, our municipality with full municipal service systems. And the dark lines represent, or the thicker lines represent our road network, okay? And that's generally where we have services underneath. And then we have these dotted lines. And these dotted lines represent our individual titled property. So these are a bunch of private property owners who are all connecting to the yellow line. This is a full municipal service system. And then we have this scenario where, again, we're in the same square, but the bottom, we have still yellow, but the top is now blue. There's only 4 or 8 property owners up top, and we've got the same down below. Again, private owners without full servicing is what the blue is representing. So they're private systems, they have much larger lots. And then we have the scenario where we have just rural, okay? When we talk about water systems, there's, I would say, the misuse of terms often, okay? Communal does not equal decentralized. And that's one of the biggest things to pull apart. You can have, in this scenario, let's say this upper block here, this is one property owner. That property owner can have a low-rise apartment building and 2 single detached homes that connect to 1 septic and 1 well. That is still considered private. If all these individual property owners connected to, let's say, down in this corner, a septic bed, and up here, a well, the crossing of property lines of services is what denotes it to be either a decentralized or a full municipal system. So if this was just servicing a part of the municipality and we're crossing property lines, that's when it becomes a shared service. And the issues is the following. In the case where, and I really should have done another slide with like a apartment building on it. This square up here where we have this apartment building and these 2 other single family homes, and let's say we have a total of 24 units. If the septic fails, they call their landlord. If we have the 1 well down here and we have the 1 septic up here and the septic fails, these property owners start to fight with who's responsible. And that comes down to these responsibility agreements and this intensive planning process that has to be done when it comes to decentralized systems or full municipal systems, right? There has to be a party who's responsible. And so where I guess I'm going with this is there's often a little bit of a misconception that if you're building a 24 unit apartment building with a well and with a septic, that it's decentralized. It's not. It's a private system, as long as those units are rental. If you were to build those units and they were condo units, everyone, it's a condo strata. Everyone has individual title. Condo corporations have boards. There's an entity into perpetuity, right? It's living on forever. So that is where creating condos in these types of situations also have some nuances too. Or mobile lease parks and things like that. There's an entity that's serving the long-term responsibility. But when we have situations where a system is going to cross property lines, someone has to be responsible for it. And that's where this complicated factor of EA, ECA, MECP, AA, like I can just say them all right now. That's where this like very long process starts. And so when we look at what we want to do with a property, it's really important to understand like the objective from a municipality's perspective. Municipality owns this property. Do we want it to be a property that enables others in the municipality to get servicing from or not? And answering that question right there, regardless of, I mean, ownership kind of comes into it too a little bit, right? If you're RFPing it to a private party, they're not going to offer servicing to anyone else. So that kind of answers that question. It's MECP. That's the route it's going. Pretty standard. If we are wanting to like create a well, because it's high, we wouldn't want to put a septic bed up there. That would be expensive. And enable future connection. It is the whole kit and caboodle. And that's what Verona's going through. Verona's intention with their water system is not just to enable their current housing, they want to enable others to connect to it. And that is why their process is this long drawn out process that has to be done because it will be enabling others throughout the municipality to connect to it. So those are like, it's a lot, right? To kind of like think through. And the most important question to ask too is that, is this land suitable for servicing for anyone outside of that property? And you know, that's like a preliminary question to ask. And then the objective of what the municipality wants to see happen and who the municipality would like to see build the project are also very important to answer first. Because pending the outcomes of those, you may not have to spend any money. And just RFP it, put in a lot of conditions, work with a private developer, get the housing built. If the municipality is wanting to do it, and the servicing is just going to service that property, again, it's a pretty easy process, even if it's municipally owned. But if the municipality sets out an intention that they want future property owners to connect to it, EA, full ECA process is happening. So those are the, now I'm not saying that there still aren't complicating processes. When you're dealing with wells and septics, there's still processes, but they are different. And so that's where we kind of have to reflect on.
So just a quick question. If we were to decide that we just wanted to service, like at the moment, we just want to service that piece of property, but 10 years down the road, we change our mind and want to add on, which I know some of these communal services can do, would that change the process?
I think in any scenario, I'm not going to talk about this property in particular. If you truly think that you want to enable it, you have to start that way because you do have to design and size those systems for that future use. But bearing in mind, like communal does not mean a large Nuterra thing. It might just be a well and a septic bed with like a little advanced treatment. Like there's many, many different types. I know we are often kind of being exposed to this big Nuterra thing. It really doesn't, it's not necessarily that. There's pre-treatment that definitely will likely have to take place in any case for a septic bed that's going to service a low-rise apartment building. But it's not going to be this big modular thing likely. So I think if the, you know, objective of the municipality is to find a way to set out to provide full servicing, to look at all the municipal land that the municipality does have access to or could have access to and go, what's the best? And that's actually kind of one of the first preliminary steps you do take in an EA process too. And so, you know, that's the step that you have to take, not just looking at it here, you've got to look at everything and determine if there are better options. And some things you do have to consider, right, is sewage needs gravity, wells don't. So finding low points and kind of, you know, trying to put sewage more in your low points from the gravity perspective, and wells in the higher points because it's pressure fed. Yeah.
What's the easiest and most attractive option for a developer?
Um, upzone the property as most of this council's willing to do. And they're always going to have to do an SPC, right? They have to do their technical studies. I think developers are hesitant against unknowns. No one knows the geology of the site. So I think if the municipality could explore the geology of the site, right, do a geotech, and gain some preliminary understanding, if you reduce barriers of ambiguity for a developer to go, all right, yeah, water table's here, the soils are this, they'll know. I know looking at it, this is possible. But it's a lot to ask someone to spend the money on to not know. So that's kind of, when I look at maybe some of the other grant opportunities we look at, it's to cover doing studies like that, doing a geo, a hydro-G, and some of those preliminary works. That's the exact information that they need to then send to their civil engineer and go, what can I build? So, and we will get that also by doing those reports. We'll know what the water capacity is, or the likely water capacity. We could do a well test too. But I would do those two reports.
So just to follow up to that, that's assuming it's a private system. So my question wasn't necessarily what's more favorable in a private system. It's of the three options, which I don't think we're going centralized. So either between a decentralized and a private system, what's more favorable and easier for a developer?
If the municipalities owning and operating the decentralized system, that enables a developer to hook up to it. If you're asking a developer to build the decentralized system itself, a lot of barriers. So either the municipality goes and goes about creating that decentralized system, working with FMS to create your system standards. Again, that private developer, they don't want to know, they need to know their system standards. And what I mean by that, the correlation is in Ottawa, when you go to build, your civil engineer can go online and go, all right, I'm a 4-inch pipe. Their minimum required slope is 1 point, whatever. You get all those system specifications. So you can go and build a decentralized system for private developers to hook up to, but you need to have those system specifications that, again, remove barriers for them. If they build a decentralized system and own and operate it, they're required to enter either into an MRA or they work with someone like an FMS to take over that system, right? When we think of path of least resistance, private probably does still makes more sense to them, which is why we just see a lot of detached private development still using those systems. I don't know if I've fully answered your question. Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone else? Does anyone online have a question or comment? Okay, all is quiet.
Justin's not saying anything at all.
Yeah.
Oh, there's.
Okay. So at
There's
this
Justin.
point, do we want to have our little breakout sessions, or is there more before that?
Yeah, I like this workshop, I guess, is a bit of me talking and you guys asking me questions. And like the question, Duncan, that you ask, like that has a lot of layers to it, and kind of scenario discussion. So I would say, sorry, if there are scenarios that are in anyone's mind right now, like shout them out and let's talk about them.
Okay. Okay. So scenarios. Do we see 24 units sitting there? Do we see 24 units with something in the bottom for, say, a library, which is something we've talked about?
So partial underground, 2 stories.
That's like what I've envisioned. Yeah, is something like that.
So commercial-ish on the bottom floor. Apologies, commercial-ish on the bottom floor, residential on the
Yeah.
top two.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. One thing to add to that, because nothing can ever be easy, Bill, is 25% is the max floor area for non-residential use for most of funding programs. So we just would have to make sure that the library, for example, if we put that in there, that it doesn't represent more than 25% of the total building square foot.
What was the total square footage for the 24 or the estimated?
Let me see.
You had it way, way back there.
So this was just based off of, I mean, this could be across 2 floors. And so we could, across 2 floors is this. So, you know, I think 5,000 has been kind of the number that I've been told for, like, what's the square footage of the library requirements?
Well, that's what they asked for.
They want
What I have-
5,000.
That's what they asked for, yes.
They will not get 5,000 square feet. They've got about 800 square feet now.
Okay.
But I think 2,500, 3,000 square feet is something that's logical and would have to do at
And,
the cost of 5,000 feet.
and I think they're quite happy if they would love the gold standard would be 5, but I think that they would be quite happy with 25 to 3,000.
Sure.
Definitely a step up from what they have now.
It's huge from what they have now. And it would be nice to have a library where there's 24 units of people that might be using it. And it's so centralized. It's a perfect spot.
Sorry. So with the comments, and I know Kathy and Fran, you've also relayed some of these to me too, that there's another interest in the municipality, which isn't just housing, but also the library. So in that, would that produce other capital too? That could be, yeah.
I think that's what she had mentioned in the letter, because they can apply for funding.
Mhm.
Probably are successful in that end, so.
Mm-hmm.
If we're thinking longer term, I mean, the village is on an odd little piece of land here. And if wells start to fail, would a communal system or some kind of municipal system not make more sense that in the future, like we're thinking long term, that in the future?
You're looking at me, so I guess you want my opinion on that. I would love to see 24 units, somebody privately come in and just put them up there and be done with it and not have to jump through any hoops. But in reality, a number of years ago, the wells in Charbot Lake were at risk of being polluted by their septic systems. And there were pitless adapters put in. But there are places that are on pumping out their tanks. They can't get they have holding tanks. So I think to say that no, there won't be anything in the future would be having blinders on, because there will be need in future.
So to that point, then we shouldn't just turn a blind eye to it today
No.
and think of the long term and
That's
what
right.
we would be doing.
And that's why the Frontenac Municipal Service Corporation has been working so hard to talk to the government to try and do something to ease these EAs and jumping through all those hoops that take thousands and thousands of dollars and years to get done. But I think in fact, it's something that we're going to need to look at on that site. Nikki.
My question is to follow up just on what you said. Justin's online. Does he have any update if we were to go a communal system through the corporation? Has he made headway with the government, 2 levels of government, to fast track these systems?
Thank you for the question. I, I don't, not that it's a simple answer, but I would say that in the time that I have been with FMSC, I would say, and I believe the feeling is shared by my colleagues and counterparts, that we have made headway. with the provincial government. So we have been engaging quite regularly with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, as well as the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So both ministries are actively involved in consulting with us and engaging with us, and it's been reciprocal. We've also had the support ongoing from MPP John Jordan on this file, and he's been a great advocate for us to his provincial counterparts, the two ministers of the ministries I've just referenced. What really has been the perhaps the most significant breakthrough in a positive way in the last few months is that I think the involvement of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, because I think they've really led the charge on accelerating a lot of the potential for communal services. There was a bill passed in the legislature in May of last year, Bill 17, and that specifically opened a lot of the door, if you will, to building under with communal services. And since that time, there has been a number of discussions and announcements that have taken place. You may be aware, for example, that the Township of South Frontenac received some funding from under the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund for its Verona project, specifically for the use of communal services. So we took that as a really positive, almost an endorsement of what we're trying to do, because there was now some provincial dollars attached to that development. And more recently, there's been consultations held with joint consultations between both ministries, where they've specifically contacted us to ask us for some insights and some more information, because they're really trying to, I think, grasp the potential of communal and what this would mean for accelerated housing development in rural areas. And it's a really great example that we're talking about today. So we continue to have those conversations. There's a lot of interest. I would say again, and I haven't been around these tables very long. It's coming up just on a year. But some of those others that have participated in these discussions prior would have all seemed to agree that we're moving the needle forward. They've been very receptive to hearing from us. It's not as much us going and trying to knock at their doors, but it's almost the other way around, that they're saying, "Can we have a conversation about this? We'd like to learn more." Most recently, the Ministry of Environment has put out a proposal on an accelerated or a modernized, I should say, EA, environmental assessment framework, where they're looking to make some pretty significant changes to the environmental assessment process. And that is one thing that we've been advocating on, is that the process as it stands right now is very lengthy and cumbersome, especially for relatively small developments like the one we're speaking of, or the Verona project. And so there has been some recognition of that. I think that's really been a positive step, because if those changes do get implemented, they would I believe they would apply to a project like this one, and any future project that FMS would be involved with, or any future project in Frontenac County for that matter. And so by and large, there really has been, I know this is sort of a long answer to your question, but we really have seen a lot of progress, that they have been attentive, that they seem to be willing to consider the changes. They understand that, this one size fits all approach that we have perhaps been operating under up until very recently, where, it takes the same amount of time, the same amount of process to build 1,000 or 10,000 homes as it does to build 10 or even 100 homes. And some recognition that those need to change if we want to build in areas like Central Frontenac and Frontenac County. So I hope that provides some insights there. We have been encouraged, and it's we've been mentioning projects like the Charlotte Lake project in our discussion, saying that we have sites that have been identified where discussions are happening. This is no longer from where we're sitting. This is not we'd like to see this as it's not an if, but it's a when. And we've been asking the province to support us to allow that to happen, because we think that our goals and their goals are more and more aligned every day.
Okay.
The point on the water systems is that when you have hello. Just one further point on the decentralized water systems is when you have part of why Verona wanted to put it in as well is that it enables further density. This is great. It enables further density within the community. So with wells and septics, you have to have a setback from each other. So on a standard size lot, they're going to be, your well's going to be on one side, your septic's going to be on the other side, and then you have a significant barrier between the two of them. When you have a pipe and municipal water is provided, then all of a sudden that constraint is significantly lifted. So you can have an oversized septic, and all of a sudden you have where it was once maybe a single family home, you can have a duplex, a triplex, fourplex, something like that, that has the ability to be built. So I know the county and there's at the county level and at the municipal level, there's a big focus on, concentrating development to the hamlets and leaving the natural area, undisturbed. So that sort of thing does support that. It does enable it. That's part of what Verona is looking to do. I don't think there's immediate plans to hook up the water system to the surrounding community, but it's something that they now have the option to do. So when population comes and they see those development pressures, now all the houses on that highway, I think it's Highway 14 there, if I'm not mistaken, 38.
Yeah.
They have that ability to do that.
Yeah.
So thinking, 2 steps ahead.
Yeah. And I just to add to that, right? Like the one lesson learned, right? Like, because we also have to like look at the Verona project, which is like just a fantastic like initiative by Joe and Frontenac County and FMS and everyone involved. Is like where could there have been improvements and how do we improve the way of thinking a little bit? And like we have the municipal priority of providing water and sewer, but what goes with that is also then roads and sidewalks, right? And, if we're going to bring those pipes, we have to kind of look at all the factors of the pie. And that's where, we really just have to think of all the pieces and not look too narrowly at water or sewer, septic. And that's where, like, starting off on the, I can see just in the discussion, like, there's alignment right now on trying to get water and sewer services with the issues that have been raised. But when is it going to be best? When do you best align capital investment that's going to have to happen? Not just for those pipes, but for the roads and everything that has to come with it. And really, where is it best to go? And my caution is, like, I know we've got this one property here, but that doesn't mean it must go there. And where's the best property for this to go? It could be a really good site for water, right? Because water is pressure fed. We could keep the pickleball courts probably if we just did a water system up there.
You just made a lot of people happy.
Right. And so is that a favorable location? Really? But I don't see housing being able to go on that same parcel probably if we're gonna have to do a big, well and system like that. So there's going to be a change. Maybe not like, that's again where the civil involvement before I would say a final decision or even thinking about the decision to be made is done, because you might go 2 steps down and get on a train of thought and then, get bent out of sorts because civils come in a little bit later. So I really do think the geotech, the hydro-G will tell us a lot about the viability of what goes up there. They're worth the investment to make. And then, I think the next step is just when looking at the municipality and the town, I guess the town holistically, like what are all the possible options? And just making sure that the focus on where new servicing comes is the right one, not just what is shining in front of us. And that would be kind of like our input on that. Just being really, really certain that it's the best for the full town, not just the housing that would immediately come at that time. So yeah.
And I think the thing to think about too is that we have a lot of hamlets besides just this one. The problem is this is the one that has the more walkability than the other hamlets, but there are other hamlets that housing could go. but you'd need a car. But there's lots of people who live there now and they manage. So, you know, it's, yeah. Philip.
At this stage of our discussions, do we need to know what type of waste disposal system we're using, or the water, whether it's a well or we're taking from the lake? Like, do we, because we have had discussions about drawing from the East Basin and discharging into the West, which I think is ridiculous, but
Like I think early engagement with civil is what's going to be helpful for that. I think doing the 2 site studies just for that specific parcel. But I do think part of the more holistic approach is going where could the water come from? And it is in part also doing like your preliminary, like I know that there already has been some discussions about decentralized services in the community. But yeah, there has to be a lot of thought put in location of where the system would go and why, and then you get to, you know, pros and cons of each site and stuff like that. So it's an exercise that I think takes time and needs to be really thorough. In addition to the site specific. So that would be, I think, a valuable exercise to go, and it goes concurrent with what I know Sonia and her team and Joe have already, I think, started doing with some of the consultation that's already started happening. But working with a bit of a civil team at the onset will be very helpful. And helping guide, I would say, like where the direction's going to go.
I think we can agree to that. Are people agreeable that we need that information? We don't know what the geology and whatever else is up on that site, that is something we should move forward with. I see nods. So let's do that. However we go about that.
Okay.
That's in your bailiwick.
I just have a question to that point, though. You're the first person that's kind of said that the site may not be appropriate for both housing and sewage or water treatment. Is that your feelings?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we don't know the soil context, right? And so until we know that, do we know what size of bed would be needed if we did like a sewage system, either just for the housing or for others to connect to? It's a guessing game at this point. So, you know, the site is a nice size, but can we only put up a building of X size and then that's not viable? If we're doing a system that's going to be a bit larger to provide more municipal wide servicing, and then again, it just may be that we have to take up too much space for a system that then impacts parking, that then impacts other aspects of the site, which then shrinks the building footprint, which then, you know, is it a viable building at that point? So those are the influences to the pro forma that we were trying to kind of balance out, because we know it's just said people drive. And while this is a more walkable area, everyone who lives there is going to at least need a car.
Sorry, just to shift that for a second. When I'm talking about the size of the property, like I'm talking about the footprint of the property. 'Cause
Yeah.
what we've presented so far, and maybe I'm not understanding, is these treatment facilities that we're looking at don't actually require anything in the ground, right? We have the well, but the actual physical space on the site. And if you're saying that those two will not fit with each other, then we should very early choose, do we want to approach a system that's able to service the rest of the town? And that site's so important to us to keep for that reason. And if that's the case, we need to figure out a different spot for the housing.
Well,
Is that what the 2 reports would tell us?
it would guide us, but so to your point, you're saying the system that's not underground, right?
Yes, that's correct.
That's like a Nuterra system
Yeah.
you're thinking about. So those are, you know, requiring typically the smallest size requires at least about 100 units is kind of that's what that size for. And we want to make sure we at least hit the size requirement so it operates well. It will have to sit somewhere on the site, but it needs a place to discharge to. So is that a tertiary bed? Can that tertiary bed be on site? Or are we outletting, and like how are we outletting? And do we need other spaces around that for outletting because that system is going to treat and process sewage, and there'll be sludge, and then there's going to be excess water. Where are we putting those? And so we still do need some space, I would say. But to your point, like what the civil engineers would be able to say is, this is your safe space that you have to create for this system, either just for the proposed building, or if we want it to bring a larger to service multiple, they would have to do this based off their experience. Further studies have to be done, but they can go, okay, based off of our experience, you'd need a footprint of X for the modular system, and you may need a buffer of Y for just additional space. And then we just place that over the site plan and go, okay, now what's left? And just do percentages.
Yeah, and so I guess what I'm saying is we don't need to know what's underneath the soil at that point. If you look at it and say there's not enough space on the site for both, right? Let's save that money and spend a different site. We've got lots of property in Central Frontenac, and then start doing those studies you're talking about to see what we could put on those sites for systems that have to go in the ground.
Yeah, I'll let you, but
Yeah.
I think it does. So it comes back to the other question. We're talking in this situation about a large Nuterra site. And I think there are other variables I still think have to be considered, even if it's a large Nuterra site, a large Nuterra system.
I think they go small. We got two mics. I think the smallest is 30.
Yeah. Here.
We're all dead. There we go. I think for a Nuterra system is 30 households.
The smallest one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I
again,
mean,
it depends on usage, right?
But this, and I know Justin could probably speak to this too, like we get in our minds Nuterra, but it honestly may just be like a small little thing that's not Nuterra made, right? That's just where our minds go with it, because they're obviously at the forefront of these modular systems. But I think it would be critical to understand the geology of the site, back to your point, to know what options do exist there or not, and to cancel them out. Otherwise, we're just kind of going on, I think, with blinders in terms of assessing what is possible, and just kind of like modeling a Nuterra site.
Yeah, and maybe just kind of further to that point. So the soil analysis determines the type of soil, determines if the water's, like the excess water, is going to be able to be discharged on there and how much space it would need. So for example, if it's very sandy, it would need a larger space. If it's less, then it would need a smaller space. So those initial studies, those geotechnical studies would help inform that. That's kind of because I think that might have been the crux of the question is we do these studies so we can understand the site layout and the site, like what the site can handle in terms of a septic field, or the discharge field, as it would probably more appropriately be called. So we can understand what the space requirement would be for the size of the system that would be proposed to go along with that housing development. And then from there, we make the adjustments appropriately. So, if it's going to, crash the site essentially because we need such a large field because of the soil characteristics that we would have to, remove housing to make room for that, then we would, adjust and pivot the design.
What would the cost of those studies be, and how would we pay for them?
So I think we'd probably want a budget of 35. And that's because of bringing the machine to do the borehole, and that work. So around that, I would say about $35,000. Oh, and the hydro G too. Yeah. Yeah, about that asterix. But I've actually pulled up Verona's geotech, and I don't know, like, again, this is supposed to just be educational based. Like, I can show the group what a geotech report shows us, right, from a testing perspective, because it's important to, like, what is it that we're looking for, and these are the variables that are given to us. So when we talk about boreholes, okay, we're going to the site with like an auger. We're going in, we're pulling out. And then these are the characteristics that we're talking about. So in Verona, we've got clayey silt, silty sand, and then where the borehole terminated. It's also telling us where the bedrock is. And the other column, far to the right, is also telling us where we're encountering groundwater. So where does the groundwater sit on that site? Because that's also important, I think, for some of the concerns too. There's still like, you do further testing, but it's giving us some of this preliminary information to be like, all right, is the groundwater, 6 feet, I'm just saying that, do we want to have, or can we even have like sewage sitting on top of that with such, do we have enough distance happening between the groundwater and where the septic would go, regardless of the size, right? Regardless if it's 24.
There is a septic in there with the school.
Yeah.
And there is a well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And so having an existing well, I mean, that's important actually. You might have told me that, and I apologize, I don't know that, but can we use that existing well to do some testing on, right?
we were going to, but I don't know if we ever got somebody to come and do a pump test.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you. So if we were to decide that, that's the perfect site and we really want housing there, we also own a piece of property on the other side down where there's a parking lot. So if we were to go and not put the septic on that site and only have water on that site, could we not put a system down below on a different site that deals with the septic? Because it is going downhill.
Yeah, Kathy has shown me that property before, and I'm pulling it up here.
Might always also be a discharge spot in the field across from the barber shop.
Yeah, so that's this site, right? I think it's. Is it along here? Yeah. Yeah. So, but that's part of it, right? Like one thing I would, encourage, I know the Garrett Street property, that there's an intention there that's been set out with buying that. Like we know that for sure. But I think identifying, what are all the little pockets of land that are owned in the municipality. And you kind of have to do an analysis of like path of least resistance for developing them, and financial viability of bringing them online. So again, like you have to bring pipes to them, right? So there's a large amount of infrastructure that has to take place at the same time with roads, etc. So, when you look at your strategic plan right now, where have those upgrades been mentioned? Are they planned anywhere? That's where you have to really start bringing that alignment on, I would say objectives that the municipality may have.
I think for $35,000 to know what that site can or cannot do is worth the investment. And I think there's probably some grants that we can apply for to cover some of the cost of that.
There were. So we don't know what FCM is doing with their program. So we've obviously been successful in the one, but we did apply to that last year, and then the program did shut down. They have told us that their intention was to open it back up in April. So I can pester them a little bit. I always joke, one of them gave me their cell phone number, and that was a mistake. So I'll reach out to them and just see what's happening. I would say really in general, funding and the environment for grants is just a black hole with Bill Canada Homes and the shutdown of a lot of the CMHC programs. Are not doing the seed program this year. That's been a long tenured program that gave projects funding for stuff like this. So now we have put this project and the municipality in the Bill Canada Homes submission that our team's doing. It's part of our pre-development grant request. So we have a big portfolio that we are submitting, and that portfolio includes the Verona project as well. But we're grouping projects together as a portfolio submission and making a pre-dev request for our projects in the pre-development stage. So this project is part of that.
Just if we're going to look at the geotechnical study, I would like to say, perhaps as Nikki suggested, we also look at the site down below if we're thinking about the entire village. No, if we're
Right.
going to do a geotechnical study to understand, I guess, what
Can
what
go.
on the
what
ground.
what the components are there that you can discharge there, or whatever the case may be. We probably need to include both sites then, just if we're thinking longer term for the village.
Okay.
There's some economies of scale typically too that you see with the sites at the same time. So
Let's get an estimate of cost to do those. Dan,
I just wondered how many units you could put on just a normal well and septic, and whether or not you could do a communal service somewhere else other than that property that would do the whole village and do it in two parts and just do housing, at that one specific site. Would that study show that?
Yes. Yeah. So normal septic is kind of what's a normal septic. So I would say a typical well, yes. And the studies would show us I guess they would validate whether or not moving forward with just housing there on what would be considered a private system. The municipality would own it, but I think working with like FMS to manage and maintain it would still be the objective there too. Like someone's got to manage and maintain that still. But that would still be considered private because it's not connecting to any other properties. And at the same time, looking at where decentralized can take place on other parcels of land, like for sure.
Or tie into that, it could also tie into that communal service with that property as well, so another parcel.
On another parcel. Yeah, like if we did that service there, for sure. I mean, so this is when we get, you've hit on something, right? Which is, if the town knows that you are going to do decentralized services somewhere, is it better bang for your buck to wait to then hook the Garrett Street project up to that? I think is what you're getting at.
Yes, and how much more property would that take to do the communal service for the rest of the village? How much, area or, do we need to do that if we do a separate parcel?
I don't know. I really don't. We can look at the approximates that we have for Verona and like have an understanding, but like we're really not qualified to like offer a lot on that. I think we would need
Would that study show that? How big an area you need?
that study wouldn't show that, but one thing that we did with a civil engineering firm who we have spoken to about the property, and which is where I'm pulling these quotes from, is doing a serviceable feasibility study. So understanding the total capacity requirements of the area and what that would require. And that would be a study that they would do to determine an initial baseline. We can get a quote for that because it could go hand in hand with testing these two sites. It could be a separate, fully separate study though. But because what you have to determine is how many units do we have right now and how many do we think would hook up to it in the next 25 years? Like what would develop? You have to kind of think long term like that. So they kind of have to run those scenarios.
Just so we put that somewhere else, it might give us more area for housing
Yeah.
and our library and everything else on that site.
Yeah,
And still tie into a communal system somewhere else. We knew how big of a parcel.
I agree.
that we
I
needed.
agree. Yeah, I agree.
the one worry that I have about any system is bedrock.
Yeah.
You need to bury pipes and you need to put pipes from houses to get to the systems and the costs of that.
Mhm.
When you look at cities that are ripping up all of their pipes that have been in there for 50 years and
Yeah.
the problems it's given them, it's a very big project that we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah. I mean, so one thing that we could look at, right, is in addition to the two parcels, sorry, do we drill a borehole somewhere else in a road or somewhere close to a road to understand what the bedrock is in between those two parcels? Because that's going to change. That might be too premature, right? But that would also be another good thing to do early on. I mean, everyone does have septics, and those septics that are in town right now, you know what ones, how deep they are. So that gives you a pretty, like, that could actually just be part of the community consultation process, is just literally going door to door and seeing if you can just go and see the depth of where everyone's septics is, because that's kind of proof of already what we're dealing with. So there's that. And then I think the other thing I would mention too, like what I've been seeing, and I hate to always refer to Ottawa, but there's some good examples, is the financial approach of asking people to hook up, and like paying in to hook up versus not paying in to hook up, and how do you strategize that capital or not? And you know what I mean? So, and that would be, you know, again, working with the operator of managing that system, so like with FMS, that strategy has to kind of, you have to do that. So there's all these little things that happen concurrently, essentially, is what we're trying to say. And doing as much as we kind of can together is always recommended. There are always going to be some things that push ahead that then pause, then the other things push ahead. But we do have to look at this very broadly, and you know, from, again, how do people hook up? Do they pay? Do they not? Does that go towards your reserves? Like, how do you do that? So, because at the end of the day, you have to pay for it all.
All things are possible until the studies are done, essentially, right? Like that's that'll inform everything.
Yeah, the studies are the grounding that we need to get our thoughts in which way things need to happen.
And just as a quick note on the you know, additional priorities, you know, Verona, one of the things we were able to do in the redevelopment of the Verona street itself is that was part of the KMP trail. So you had people that would exit the trail, go onto the road, and then, you know, cross the road and go back onto a separated trail. So part of our design is we've been able to take, you know, have a dedicated multi-use pathway in the, as we're redesigning. So I know there's been talk of sidewalks, there's been talk of sort of additional priorities. You know, it's good to have those in mind at the beginning so we can budget them in, because, you know, hard curbs, things like that. But it's a big opportunity.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, so if we're looking at adding public space as the library, would that get incorporated into the pro forma, to what we would be charging essentially market rents for that space? And
Yeah. So adding, right, once you build your foundation, adding on top of that, that's where you start achieving real economies of scale. So of course, that's going to have a really good impact on rental rates. Understanding what that library pays, though, too, right? So if the township is subsidizing the library, then understanding that, right? So then we've got to just allocate in the pro forma, like what we would do is,
well, I mean, if it's going to be a private developer, we're going to be paying them something to rent the space. So
well, and that's where Nick's taking us. Is it going to be a private developer? Is the
yeah, we're talking
municipality?
about that later, right?
Yeah. Is the
I-
municipality building it? Are there partnerships, right? Is it a nonprofit provider building it and working with the municipality? And the pros and cons, like, of that, there's better grants, right? If the municipality does it, and a nonprofit, there's cheaper financing, and full autonomy. A private developer does it. You don't know if they're going to give you a high quality space, or what are the contingencies around all that. So there's a lot to think about on that front. So maybe that's a good segue to workshop two. But our takeaways are going to be that, and I might, while you're doing yours, play around with Performa just based on our chat too, actually, and you know, we can pull it up in the debrief. I have it here, so I'll pull it up and we'll do just live entries, and you'll see the integration of how they're impacted. So 5 minute break? Yeah, perfect. Okay.
Trying to see. Battery levels, they're all a little, but they're okay though.
Options.
Okay, I think we're ready to go back to work. Okay, folks. I get to hit the table with the pad.
It's quite a week.
It was. It's my whole state these days. Okay. So Lindsay, what section are we at now?
Yeah.
It's Nick. Nick is taking over? Okay. Hello.
Oh, pardon me, please. These things. Nice to see everyone. Nice to meet everyone. My name is Nick Lorway. I'm a senior project manager here at 2B Developments, Rural Impact Canada. I've been working on the Verona project alongside Lindsay for quite a while now. Years. So the workshop today is going to talk about the ownership and kind of partnership options within the development. So as has kind of been discussed, there's a couple different ways to go about doing this, each with their own drawbacks, benefits. Our analysis primarily looks at kind of an XY axis of Y axis is financial capabilities, willingness, if you will, risk tolerance. And then the X axis is control and experience. That kind of control is a very big word in the sense of desire to control and ability to control and seeking to assess that. So this presentation, as I'm gonna not just why don't I share my screen, number one? And
We're really good at technology.
I love technology. Here we go. All right, now I can just get this bar out of the way and do it. And I'm not gonna, there we are. Wonderful. Okay. So we're going to be going over kind of the different ownership structures for the development that we've identified and the suitability. Perfect. It's right there. Their suitability to municipal objectives and constraints, assessing benefits and weaknesses. And then we're going to do an interact. I sure can. I can do it right here. It reminds me of my year singing, of course. Then we're going to do a survey based off of what's sort of best for Central Frontenac. So reviewing the ownership options is first up. What are we seeing? Doing this survey through like a Google form we have, so you'll be able to get your phones and fill out the surveys yourselves. Part of that is, everyone has a different, it's very subjective. We'll say, what is the municipality's kind of risk tolerance to this? And everyone will have maybe a bit of a different answer, which is going to be great. And we'll plot that on a scatter plot that we have for our 4 options. It's anonymous. Yes.
We share.
Disagree, so it's okay. We know that.
And then we'll discuss the results and kind of talk about, where we're seeing the highest correlation of answers, what quadrant we find ourselves in, and we'll discuss that in a little bit more detail. By no means is what quadrant we find a majority of respondents in. Like by no means is that the end all be all. There might be kind of a desire to do something else, and that's part of this initial. This is an initial conversation. Please move. Thank you. So this is an overview of our ownership matrix. There it is, and here's an overview. So you can see kind of in our quadrants here, an assessment of financial capacity and control. So our left top quadrant here is going to be a high financial capacity, low need for control. So that's where we see partnering with some sort of operator, typically a not-for-profit society. We'll go into that further. To the right there, self-managed and self-development, fairly self-explanatory as well. The bottom left will be issuing an RFP or an EOI of the land, essentially having a private developer do it or a private society do it. And then the last option we have identified here is a municipal service corporation, sometimes called local government corporations. FMS is one of those. Essentially, it's a municipally owned and operated entity that exists outside of the municipal system.
And just for everyone, this is
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for you. So financial capacity, our y-axis here. So reviewing the questions will relate primarily to the availability of pre-existing assets. So the land, which, we know Central Frontenac has and has identified, the ability, Central Frontenac, yeah. The ability to spend, the ability to take on debt and hold that debt, within the annual repayment limits, and then the financial risk capacity and desire within that. And then on our x-axis, we evaluate control. So decision-making, authority, desire to have that authority, a desire to manage the operations, risk capacity on terms of, the operational side, and the operational risk capacity there. We have, for an example, we have a client out west who has said from the beginning, we want to own it. We do not want to operate it. We don't want people coming to the front door of the town offices and saying, I would like somewhere to live. Please help me with that. Or my pipe's broken, can you get the management out here? They just don't want to deal with it. They, from the get-go, have assessed that. So this is kind of how we're beginning this process. So going through these in a bit more detail. So partnering with an operator, which was our top left quadrant there, indicating high financial capacity and a low need or capacity for control. So essentially there's an ability to fund the housing project, but not necessarily a desire to manage the day-to-day operations or capacity to do so. So typically we see this in two forms, either the municipality funding and developing the project directly, and then partnering with a not-for-profit manager for management. That could be, Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation. I believe Central Frontenac, there also is a housing corporation here. Perfect. Or funding the not-for-profit directly to own and develop the housing. So from the get-go, it's developed by the not-for-profit and the municipality provides that sort of seed funding. Well, Lindsay goes through the pro forma after our presentation. We'll sort of show. So the idea is you would help provide the equity, but they would, develop it themselves. This can also include a long-term lease on the property. That's typically what we would see this as. So there's still the ownership or transferring the ownership of the asset upon the completion. So, the municipality could develop it themselves and then just give it away at the end of it for, a long-term lease for $1 or something like that. Our next option we have is that self-developing and manage. This is kind of, I think, how a lot of people default on projects. So the idea that you would build the project yourself, fund it yourself, and then have someone on staff who becomes the owner-operator sort of role. They manage the maintenance, they manage everything, they tenant it, do all that. So this can include the municipality funding and developing the project in-house. This is typically what we see for that. And then maintaining that direct oversight and input. So this is nice if you really, there's an attitude of we built it, we want to maintain it, we want to own it, we want to manage everything about it. This is really good for that sort of viewpoint. Our bottom left quadrant there indicating sort of a low financial capacity and a low need for desire for control is issuing an RFP or an EOI for the land. So I'm sure everyone's somewhat familiar with this process, but we identify the property. We issue an RFP for a developer to come and build on the land subject to stipulations. It could be, must contain a certain number of units at a certain number of rents, something like that. You play a bit of a Goldilocks game here where you don't want to put too many stipulations on because then they're just not gonna bite. And you don't want to, et cetera. Essentially that you don't want to have not enough because then you just get two houses on it and not really satisfying your municipal objectives. We also see it having use restrictions. So, there has to be some sort of retail or, mixed use. Sometimes that's included. Or it can just be funding, funding or lease rates that are tied to that objective. So if you have a certain number of affordable housing that you continue to provide, the lease rate is this, you can kind of have a bit of a floating rate, or sometimes it's just the outright sale of the land. The municipality saying, well, we're going to zone it residential and then we're going to sell it. And then, if someone buys it, typically we'll see some housing built on it, which is a very kind of low control. You're not really going to necessarily 100% meet your municipal objectives, but you can, kind of wash your hands of it a little bit. And then our last operation we see here is the Municipal Service Corporation. So this typically shows a low financial capacity and a high need for control. The low financial capacity element of this is typically seen with the debt capacity for the municipality to hold. So municipal service corporations act as municipally owned corporations that exist outside of the municipal structure. So FMS is a great example where Central Frontenac owns shares in FMS. Yeah, exactly. They own shares in it and it exists outside. So when certain stipulations are met from an accounting standpoint, typically that, they're able to actually make their own decisions. They have some sort of board of trustees and they're able to cover all of their own costs without an annual kind of injection of capital from the municipality. And a couple other, a couple other stipulations as well. The debt is usually off the books for the municipality. So the mortgage would be serviced by this other entity, but the municipality would be able to enjoy the benefits of having that housing and having this corporate entity that manages it and pays the mortgage and does all that sort of thing. So we see it as municipality develops the housing and then transfers it to the MSC after it to manage the mortgage, or similar kind of with the not-for-profit. The MSC is created and then funding is given to the MSC with the explicit purpose of building this housing, and then it just owns it from the get-go and kind of in perpetuity. This can also include, partnering with a housing manager for ongoing management, or a holding corporation. There's a variety of other structures. This is something that we're looking at with South Frontenac, and that's I think all I can really say. Too much about that, but
Yeah, and just
Sorry for the interruption, but we can't hear any audio right now. My apologies.
No, sorry,
Thank you.
Sonia. So what I was getting at was just from the MSC side, what we know in rural and small municipalities is the ARL annual repayment limit makes it really hard for municipalities to just go out and get a mortgage to do the stuff or take on debt to do infrastructure, etc. And we know of MSCs from a utility standpoint, but they are also economic tools and drivers for other things. So they can be tourism based too, but they can also be housing and land development based. And so there are many cases that we come across where a smaller, more rural municipality has a lot of land, and they want to do something with it rather than just issue it for $0 or minimal dollars to hopefully get something. We are working with municipality up north right now that's transferring land into their housing corporation, which is an MSC. And the distinction is not all housing corporations are MSCs. Some are just a housing corporation. Some are purposely meant to be a municipal service corporation that does housing. So just bearing that in mind, that from the MSC standpoint here, I do think it's worth a bit of context because it's a complex, I would say, process in some ways. But really what it's meant is to enable municipalities to borrow when they don't have the ability to borrow under your current constraints. And a point that Nick's made, the main purpose is so that they don't consolidate into your financials, but they have to demonstrate that they are self-sustaining in order to do that. And building residential housing is one of the best ways to satisfy that requirement with your auditors. So your auditors are ultimately the person that determines if they are to be consolidated or not. And you have to demonstrate revenue. And revenue not from the municipality, but from other people, so tenants. So they're a really great source. I think, so they, anyways, we can go more into the discussion on that, but I just want to add a bit of context to it too. I'll stop interrupting you, Nick.
yeah, you can come up with the equity payment, but holding the mortgage for 35 to 50 years, it just crushes your ability to do anything else. So these are really great tools for assisting in that.
And Michael will help us with that. The treasurer at ESIC. Yes.
Nick, should we go around the table and just see what people's gut feelings are
Sure, absolutely.
for those different ways of doing this?
Go right to the survey.
Okay,
Whatever we'd like to. Yeah, why don't we do the survey then? So
well,
I
it's
just have,
fresh in our minds.
yeah, absolutely. So so the survey, I'm going to put up the QR code in just a second on the next slide. So you can scan it with your phones just through the camera. It'll pop up as a link and you'll be able to fill out the questions. I'll also walk through the questions here. But essentially the questions will go over risk, control, capacity, and expertise within that. So if you want to just scan the code there, let's make sure it works for everybody. Work this morning. Yep, absolutely. So yeah, so if everybody, I'll give it 2 seconds here for everybody to scan here, and then I'll drop the link in the chat. Just living in the moment. Okay. Here we are. So I'm just gonna quickly go in here.
So we are going to do this
Sorry, 1 second.
incognito.
I'm just gonna quickly pull up the form myself here.
Phone thinks I want to take pictures of people's faces. I'll bring my computer over. You put it up.
Perfect. Yeah. So it's published here. I just want to make sure that we have the log link in the chat. I'll put it right back up in just 2 shakes. I'll just throw. Should be good there. And then I can go in here. Responder link. Right on. So anyone here in the chat will be able to give this to you here.
Thank you.
And that's the responder link. Thank God for that.
Different type of photos, but not that. No, I didn't.
Okay, so I'm going to run through the questions as well. So I know many of you have. Oh, what's going on? I've already kind of gone through it. That's all good though. Maybe it's a bit easier actually if everybody just kind of fills it out. I think that's already what's happening here instead of me just going through and reading questions that you've already answered here.
But I like it better in the categories that you had than these questions. Because I think we need to think about whether or not we want to hold a mortgage, one.
Yeah.
And that would, but there's 1,000 questions to get to it then.
No.
But in the end, it is.
Yeah, trust the process.
Yeah. This is just meant to be an initial sort of sounding on what are we thinking for options for ownership. You know, as you mentioned, some questions like will we hold a mortgage are going to be weighted a lot more than some of the other questions, you know, in reality. Our hope is that this is fairly reflective and the questions are balanced in such a way that it will work out. So if you have any questions, just let me know.
Do we got my?
Did you change your mind? That's funny.
So you made a comment about condos, and I'm just wondering, do you see any of these types of developments actually structured as a condo, but maybe still owned by the nonprofit or the municipality? That's, you know, in the future, then you have more options to do something with the units, right?
It's hard because with condos, you'd create land transfer tax on the units, I think, right? There'd be a land transfer tax component to it, I think. You see the condo approach more on the like modular mobile home sites where it's leased land, and you have a mobile trailer modular unit. That's where you see the condo corp model being used. I know the civil team that we've worked with is very familiar with that. I'm not as familiar on what I've seen it be used for, but it has been used by the private sector because that does create. I believe it significantly reduces, not necessarily eliminates, but reduces that financial component that developers are required to make a deposit because of that board that's there. So that's why we see that. But I could get some more information on that one from the civil team. Yeah.
So how are we coming on the survey there? I see a few phones down.
You know, until you're done.
You submitted at the bottom there.
But I'm saying, how do you know how close you are to the end? Until you get
Not that many questions. Only a few. Yeah, there's no rush here, folks. Hi. Why don't we give it 2 more minutes then, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, right on. All right, so I'll pull up our handy dandy graph here, and we can show kind of where the results are ending up at. So let me just make sure.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that all of our results, yeah, they're all showing up here. So one more, perfect. Okay. So what we're seeing here is it looks like there's a bit of a line in my. Yeah, so the black dots are responses here. So we can see that it looks like we have quite a few in this kind of low financial capacity, low need for control element. And then we're seeing some that are coming into the high financial capacity, high need for and capacity for control, which is perfect. Yeah, and that's municipal politics for sure. What I'd like to kind of guide the discussion about, are we feeling that it's more the financial capacity side of it, or is it more the control that we're feeling? So for some people that answered, indicating that they didn't feel like the municipality had the financial capacity. Can we maybe elaborate on that? Why don't we talk about that part to start?
It was probably me. One of the problems we have is our borrowing power is limited with the loans that we already have and the loans that we may have to take. So to put millions of dollars, because it's going to be millions of dollars, a piece of plywood's $80. So I can't imagine what it would cost to build 24 units. Would just make this municipality not able to have any debt on top of that.
Okay.
The other thing that I see is even if we formed a municipal service corporation and took the debt out that way, we're so strapped for every dollar. I don't even think we could justify the soft costs just in hiring staff to create the municipal service corporation, the initial servicing of that, especially when you're not seeing a project come to light for more than a couple years.
Okay. Any other sort of financial sort of element questions?
I'll play devil's advocate here and say if we're talking that housing is a priority and there is a need, whether it be seniors housing or any type of housing, as the municipality, if we feel that strongly about it, then do we take the risk? And it's a risk we need to take if we feel that our residents need something that bad.
Maybe I think the outcome of what access to pre-dev funding you get is important. If you can get pre-development grant funding to help cover next steps, and that funding isn't tied to a required outcome, which most pre-development funding is not tied to, that's how you continue to move it forward if it's really something you want, up to a point that you ultimately hit a wall of how far you can take those funds. And then the risks start to come. How much more do you want to go when you don't have certainty? And it's such a push and pull, because in order to get your grant funding to pay for projects and capital, funders require you to take a project so far. But then no one wants to take a project so far if they don't have the assurances that they're getting the funding. It's a really awful circle that we have to navigate. And one of the rules we play is going, okay, we have $23,000. How best do we squeeze that $23,000 to get us as much far as we can get to maybe getting to a next critical decision, without putting the municipality on the hook for further funds when you don't even know what that decision is, and what the return of that investment would be if you then ended up having to go, we have to sell the land. So there's a lot of strategy in the development of the development plan, and then picking and choosing what's to be done in each phase based off of the available funds. Again, most times when we're working with, especially our nonprofits who have no money to spare, which is very similar to really small municipalities, it's different each time, but what has to be addressed to, bring the project forward and also satisfy a comfort level to continue going forward, or what has to be addressed to know whether or not you can. But the grant funding is critical to being able to make any progress if there's a real strap for cash, and you want to have completely reduced risk. You are very much reliant on grant funding. A lot of projects are, and it's, we have good success getting those projects grant funding, but it takes time, which is add to that. So
This might actually be a good opportunity then to segue into the conversation about the pro forma and how we're modeling kind of costs associated with the project. So, because I don't think we've shown kind of the overview. I guess we kind of have a bit. Yeah.
pull it up. You can pull up that on screen.
Yeah,
quickly.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yell into that.
Where's my mic here?
Could you read some of those numbers to us? 'Cause can't really see them back here.
Yeah, like the dots and stuff?
No, when you plug the.
Performa?
Yeah.
I'll zoom into 200%.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sure the rest of you can see it, but I couldn't see it. No. Yeah.
Like from a snapshot, like I'm trying to determine what's bringing the line on this angle, right? Pull this closer. Oh, okay. There's a very clear angle happening in the matrix, right? In terms of where the dots are landing. It's going this way. So I think that that's telling. Like, does some members have more confidence, right, than others, and more desire? So I want to commit to the housing, commit to a project than not. So I just noticed the line, and it's pretty tight too. So that says a bit as well. So I think one thing that we'll do is kind of analyze this and go just based off that line being in that direction and pretty tight. Like we have one. Yeah, like everything is almost within this like 5 squares of each other, which I just find really interesting. It's heavily down too. So,
Yeah, those who are feeling that there's not much capacity for control.
You speak into the mic, please?
Yes. Yeah.
No, it's not for me. Thank you.
Those who are feeling that there's not a lot of capacity for control are also feeling like there's not a lot of financial capacity, right? Like that's what we're able to see, and vice versa. So I guess kind of the conversation, how we can move forward is, we feel pretty good about this project. We feel really good about the pro forma and actually think that the equity requirement for the municipality is fairly reasonable given kind of what's there. I think in our review of what a development pathway looks forward, I think Lindsay touched on something where, spend as much as you can recover from a potential sale of the land if things don't work out, right? And reasonably say the lots are $200,000.
yeah, like I think on that front, I've heard you having the conversation on it. Like, it's not like we're in an urban municipality where just issuing the land is going to, issue a huge bid war, right? And so, like, that's a big part of this. Like, but then the other thing too, which I would just say to this council, I've had to say this to other councils before, is you giving up land because of its low value is also not enough. It's not enough against the capital stack, right? So if we're saying this land is worth $150,000 and the project's, 7 million, that is peanuts to anyone. And it's more valuable in cash. So that's, again, like, do you spend enough, to Nick's point, to recover it? And is that essentially cash injection to get things out of it more useful than the land value because it's so low? Because there'll be little benefit placed on it. So I will pull up the pro forma. I'll kick you off.
Can I just make a comment that when going through the questions, I mean, in my mind, I kept thinking, well, I know we don't have financial capacity to do anything, so that's not helpful. I have a lot of desire for control over what's built there and what that looks like and how it impacts the rest of the village. But I don't necessarily care about the long-term operation of the building. So I don't know if that was really evident in the questions. So I felt like, maybe I was picking when I'm saying I don't want control. Well, I only don't want control of part of it.
Okay.
And I think a lot of us are feeling that same thing. And going back to your 4 descriptions, I think the one where you do an RFP and have somebody come in and build 24 units sounds really easy. We'll give you the land, you tell us what you're going to build, but we want 24 units and we want a space for a library underneath. What can you do? That would be magical.
It would be. I also think it's a nice asset for the municipality to own. I mean, we own other assets like the medical center, and those are good assets to have and hold.
But we could do a lease situation. That was the first, I think, scenario.
Mhm.
A long-term lease of the land.
Yeah.
I will say also from our experience in working with, rural municipalities, especially because the land's not serviced, they issue an RFP hoping that someone's going to come in and build 24 units, and they don't show up. Their pro forma looks just like ours, right? And they have to model in the grants or they have to increase the rents, right? It's going to be those two kind of elements to it. Or they can build cheaper or something like that. But just keeping that in mind, that it's nice kind of like, oh, well, we could just have a private developer come and do it. But those conditions are going to be different, and there's going to be a different project that emerges out of it. It's very unlikely that we can just pass it off to them and they'll just do it for us.
Yeah, so just one takeaway though, because there's a lot of nodding when you're speaking. Maybe we will do a revised Q&A that more distinguishes between control on what's built and the operations. So we'll send that out just by email, and we'll send that to you, Fran. And if everyone can just aim to finish that by Monday or Tuesday, we'll also take that into consideration too. And also, if there's any other feedback on the Q&A, our team can do a second round of that. But yeah, so like just on some of what Nick was saying, do not like snapshot this and keep this in mind. It's still a work in progress. So it's just a baseline in terms of the pro forma. And what's really great is in building the Verona project, we have really good data on that project from a cost perspective. Just for the group, we are under $300 a square foot in hard construction costs, and there's reasons for that. And it's one of the best reasons about what rural development gives us. So we can build under Part 9 for the most part. And we don't have to build very, very high, complicated projects. We can build very, very nice projects that are suitable for the community and not overly complex, and still stay under $300 a square foot. We add site costs to that too, and I've got that broken down. But so Nick was saying something, and there's so many variables in a pro forma, but I'll just go through the pages and then I'm going to go to a few. But we have our summary page, and so we've got our summary page, Fran. And this is just a snapshot. So we try not to touch any of these cells. They're all pulling from different sheets. And this is telling us, based off some assumptions that we've made, that we think the project's going to cost 7.5 million, and that includes the land costs to date. We'd be looking at 472 a square foot, all cost in, so not just hard cost, 310 a unit. And we've just put together a capital stack right now, and we show that we have a surplus based off that capital stack, 300,000. 750 might be a big chunk to consider. We do have so I can override that, and we still have a surplus. We obviously want to have a larger surplus than that, but we do have contingencies in this. So this feeds from a few tabs. Our financing calculator, which is important. So we're modeling this over a 50-year. We're modeling this at 4.89, which is the qualifying rate. 100 basis point less is 3.89. That's what the projects are being approved at right now. Actually, a little bit less. And to Nick's point, municipalities, nonprofits, all day, you'll get 3.85 in 50 years right now. Private developers are not going to get that. And so you have to consider that too. So MSCs get that. Yeah, they all lend to MSCs on that. So if we keep our rental rates that we've shown you guys so far, at the qualifying rate, it's 1.03. And that's why most of the programs say on the qualifying rate, at least come in at over 1.0, because the actual rate will be less. So just to show the severity of that, I'm going to use, that brings us up to 1.23. So that satisfies institutional lending too. So that's a plan B as well. But private sector, that's not always going to be the case. Institutional lending, 35-year M. So it drives it down to 1.06. Okay, less time to pay off the mortgage. And they need 1.2 minimum for institutional lending. So the only way to drive this back up is to increase your rates. So that's why they have to increase the rates. So right now I've got the rates here. And if I, $200 more. This is what happens when I have to do it live. Well, this just made your performer look a lot better. I'm using these rates right now. Sorry, just give me 1 second.
I have a quick
Sure.
question, Michael. So if we built, say we mortgaged the 7 million or whatever you need, it's saying 307,000 a year for a mortgage payment. If we didn't rent right away, it would be an increase, basically a 3% to the taxpayer on your taxes a year, if we didn't get full capacity rental right away.
Yeah, just over 3%, but obviously that money's going to come back over time. So yeah, it's temporary.
But does the total amount of the mortgage affect our buying power?
Well, and that's the next point. If it's in the Municipal Service Corporation, then no. If it isn't, then it does. And I'd have to look at that annual debt repayment limit that the province gives us to say, you know, where we could get to. Can we do it if it's council's wish? I'm sure we can make it work. It's a matter of the time frame and again, what risk at what confidence in the result.
And what else we can't do because we're so tight?
The opportunity cost, yes. Yes, we still have 2 loans left going. One's within a couple of years and the other one's got 5 years left, but we're better than what we were the last few years.
So our roads and bridges are not.
No.
The total cost, to the municipality comes in. The total cost to municipality comes in fairly like a lot lower, right? Like right now we're modeling it. I mean, we'll see kind of where it ends, but about $500,000 of equity payment. The rest is financed through it itself and through, the rents that it generates itself. And then a Build Canada Homes grant, which we're modeling at a 15% level, which is based off of the previous grants that CMHC had. And, a lot of the people that are working at Build Canada Homes worked at CMHC this time last year. 15% was very low for those funds. So we're modeling a pretty generous, like pretty conservative, I should say, grant level with, the development pays for itself. So one way of thinking of this is it's $500,000 to the municipality to generate 24 units of housing for an equity kind of side to it. Right, because that would be the real upfront cost for the pre-development and for the initial construction kind of side of it. After that, that's you
So
manage
the 7 million down to what?
Well, so that's So it would just be that $450,000. Yeah, that's what we're modeling to look for from the municipality. The rest of it's covered through the mortgage itself or a Build Canada Homes grant.
Somebody goes and buys their house at full price, right? They'll mortgage it.
Yeah. Same idea.
You're doing that one house and when you bought it and how long you mortgaged it for, it's the same model, like the risk.
Exactly, yeah.
Tenants and you're now doing a social good.
Exactly, yeah. And so you
just don't have the down payment.
Well, in a way we do, but the treasurer said we could have it.
Yeah. And so like, for example, one of the, Build Canada Homes is a black hole. We do a lot of engagement with them to try to find out what their funding programs will actually look like in a year when they decide to kind of tell everyone. Right now it's just submit to us and let us let's look at it and then we'll find out, which is, you know, not how the government's worked in the past. But one of the things we've looked at is, you know, potentially, you know, so we have the Build Canada Homes grant that goes towards the capital funding, but then also a separate, so we have the grant, we have the mortgage, and then a separate repayable grant that can help cover that equity cost. So one of the projects we have out west, we proposed a $900,000 equity, which would be structured as $300,000 for 3 years or for 10 years, you know, to pay back that initial amount. So, you know, Build Canada Homes is signaled a very high willingness to, you know, play ball on non-traditional granting structures. That's a big part of what we do is engage with them to make it happen, to make the housing happen. Yeah.
Here, but I just wondered about green bonds. Have you been involved at all about green bonds to be able to get like investments from outside to get the down payment, right? That you issue those.
Yeah, the bonds are risky in that if your project doesn't get going when they come up for term and how much revenue you've been able to generate. So the community bonds by like Tapestry, that's been one of the issues is they issue a bond with a repayment in 24 months and the project hasn't even broken ground just to things you can't control. So there's the risks there with the bonds with respects to that. So if you're going to do a bond, it's got to be at least a 10-year bond so that you have time to build up your reserve. So I don't know really what's happened with my pro forma, but I'm still going to bring it up, and we'll, you know, because I'll show the just the impact again of adjustments, right, that we have to think about. And on a project, I know that this project's not small, but it's still small in that any type of capital variance will have a huge impact based off the rents. So I think what I was attempting to show everyone was, you know, how do we increase the debt coverage ratio on a project to meet institutional lending requirements and the severity of how much those increases have to get, which is the problem with relying on the private sector to do it. And that's one thing we have to be really cautious about. So I think it's going to work now. Okay. So by increasing it by $200 a month, I'm still not at 1.2. So I increase it to 12. Now, 1,200 is actually not that bad. Okay. But those are the types of increases that have to happen, that when Nick says, you know, it's not viable, we have to walk away, the request for the affordability from the municipality without taking into consideration the financial feasibility of a project is normally what kills projects before they get off the ground, is a municipality issuing an EOI and RFP going, 40 units must have this rental rate, or 40 units must be at 80% MMR, 65% MMR, without understanding size of the project and ultimately what type of revenue has to be done with them. So that's where this exercise that we've done so far is super helpful, is we have a baseline. Now, the one thing that we can do is also model, please work, like mixtures. Okay. So you then bring in market rents and affordable rents, and obviously there's then a trade-off. So and that's how you bridge the gap. So we can start to model. We've got this column here. So these, just for an understanding, you see we have these percentages. These are given to us by Build Canada Homes now. And these are the rates, the top end of those ranges and what they say is affordable for those, or the top end of those ranges. This is deeply affordable. These are your emergency shelter supportive housing rates. This is low income affordability range, typically fixed income. And these are addressing your missing middle, essentially. Your grants are going to be correlated to the depths of affordability, obviously, as well. But again, so we could keep the 950 here, and I can just say, let's just call this market rent, and let's add 1,500 and 25. And so this is my disbursement table. So if I did 8 at market and 8 at 51 to 75, not bad. That's 1.24. Sorry, I will zoom in.
Could you direct any towards seniors?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's the ownership discussion though, right? Or like how do you control who a developer can work with? And there's a huge stigma in the private development industry on building anything attached to affordability. There's a big scare around, mental health issues, obviously, just this tenant behaviors. Like it's all over the place. One thing that we try to do with our private sector developers is say you can qualify for these affordable programs and not pull from a housing list. You're not required to, and really educating them on that. So I think like if the township really wanted a private developer to come in, part of your EOI, I think putting in an information sheet to say, we do want affordability, doesn't have to be pulled from a housing list. And to like, that's where you kind of bridge those gaps in information. But if the focus of the demographic is seniors to enable aging in place and also transition of new housing supply on the market, that also goes into design. So we've got to think about elevators, which we are doing for the Verona project. We've got to think about larger unit sizes, generally 12% larger, just to enable the area. Yeah. They do view it more favorably than just anyone if you do target certain demographics. So for Verona, to use that as the example, what we've done with them is said those at risk of homelessness, because many people just are living paycheck to paycheck. So we set a catch-all demographic of that, seniors, enabling aging in place, and then other, just a catch-all. But you can go very specific and say seniors in place with a library, the ability for support services to possibly come. And when you start lacing in all of that, that's what really starts to separate the application. As I said, we've been a bit more standard with the Verona project because we have the egg of pilot, innovation, modular servicing, all the words that their, computers are going to pick up on. So it's true. It's true. Yeah.
Also, really here.
Can you use the mic, please?
If you start with something like the seniors and those that are possibly homeless, later on when they have left their units, do you have to rent to the same people? Can you take that seniors unit and then rent it to a young couple?
Yeah, so generally, it's so from the auditing perspective on preserving your affordability, the requirements are submitting your annual rent roll and making sure those rent rolls meet the program requirements. So as long as they're continuously doing that, and you can increase it by 2%, I think is the allowable increase. So it's not you're allowed to do that increase. I think though, if the project is stating it's providing supportive services and there's additional grants being given for that, there's probably something we want to look into about how much money is tied to the service aspect. So I would just I don't think it would be an issue, but I'd want to clarify that. The other thing with the funding generally, because this is all from CMHC knowledge and most of the team is over at Build Canada Homes, so it's going to be pretty similar, is you get 2 10-year terms. So for 20 years, you don't have to worry about your refinancing, etc. And you can continue. You used to be able to just continue with CMHC. I have a suspicion that if there's some funding being provided from a repayable standpoint through BCH, they're going to want you to figure it out in 10. What we know further is they're really just wanting to give a grant and you to go and get your repayable loan somewhere else. They're willing to help that. So that's when we kind of look at this like 1.2. We also want to know that from your own perspective to go, could you just go to whom you do your banking with? They'd be able to go to the MLI program. I know I'm throwing a lot out there, MLI program. And to take a step back on that, CMHC used to offer 3 streams. So their MLI program, their apartment loan construction program, which is also another stream, and then the Affordable Housing Fund program, which then had 3 substreams below it. So BCH has taken over that, but CMHC is still offering the first 2. The MLI is just a certificate. It's not actually their money. It's an insurance certificate for a regular lender to go give you a larger mortgage. And then the apartment is CMHC money. The difference is, back to the private sector, they're typically under the MLI program, which means they still have to pay a broker fee, lender fee, premium fees, like all those fees you get on typical financing, they stack up. The apartment loan construction program, pretty much minimal fees, and the affordable programs, basically no fees. We facilitate the apartment loan construction program and anything under BCH, but you have to work with a broker for the other stuff. So we're allowed to handle all the mortgage financing on the other 2 streams, and that way you don't have to pay any of the soft costs. But there is that other element that's added into the complexity of all of this. So yeah.
With South Frontenac, they were very successful with your help. They have stipulated that they are going to work with the housing agent through the Ontario Housing, which is the city of Kingston. And that's why they chose affordable housing, but they have made it pretty out there that it's not going to include any social housing. But by having those partnerships in place, that helped them become successful, correct?
100%. I mean, Nick could speak to this too. They want cross collaboration. So county, province, other organizations. So the Housing Corporation also being a partner of some kind. What does that mean? That can mean a lot of things. And also, for example, South Frontenac got a $22,000 CMHC seed grant. It's pretty does nothing. It does absolutely nothing for the project, right? When we're looking at the total project cost. But that grant from CMHC provided that alignment to them, which then positioned them to be like, CMHC has already invested in us. So even if it's a $5 grant, it's still worth getting those grants because then you can show you've got the alignment. They're not going to not continue to fund. And that's how they got other funding that hopefully we can announce soon. And then will be helpful in the Bill Canada Home submission. Yeah.
And maybe just further to that. So Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation does have like a social housing element to it. Like that's one of the things that they manage, but they also just have a portfolio of rental housing. And then affordable housing is just rental housing that is not at the market rate in the area. So it's Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation, like their involvement within this is prospective manager and operator under their affordable housing portfolio, but not the social housing. And then just partially because I helped write the tenant selection documents, so I'm pretty familiar with it, but you can have criteria for people who are going to be in your facility. It's like point-based systems that you typically would use that if you can demonstrate, tie to the area, do you need additional support? Is this housing going to be appropriate to you? You're allowed to filter based off of those criteria as well. So I know that there's sometimes a fear if you build anything that's affordable, it becomes, social housing. That's not the case. Unless it's designated RGI housing, like rent geared to income, which unlocks that is a whole different kind of can of worms. Then you're not restricted to that.
Yeah, and I think the element right is there's nothing wrong with social housing, but you just need the services there. And so if you're not building the project with the services there, it's just inadequate. And then to your point, from the housing manager for the OPHI and the coachee, the city of Kingston applied to the province for the project too. So they got 1.4 for that. Yeah. And those monies are there. And, I think that the province, I know, and also the federal government, does, I would say as a whole, like Frontenac County, there's a lot of really good things that they say about Kingston and what Kingston's doing. So there's some good, strong, I would say, views of the area when it comes to housing. But that's an annual kind of opportunity. The HUSIF is back out. So we did help with the HUSIF application. And I haven't read through fully the new terms of it, but I do believe they've got a soft cost stream now too. So we'll look at that while we're also getting those quotes. And then the Build Community Strong is now the new SHIF. They just have to change the acronyms on us every year. So Canadian Housing Infrastructure Fund is now Build Community Strong Fund. And we did apply to the SHIF for Verona. We did get declined. And I meet with the Deputy Minister for Infrastructure 2 weeks. So I'll be speaking about that. And hopefully putting what do you have to say about that? Okay, yeah.
I just want to. Oh, sorry. It's 3:30 and we need to answer some questions for you before we end this. So what are those specific questions that we need to guide you from here?
Well, I think the intention was to do a debrief, and I think we've just been doing that throughout the workshop. So we're pretty good there. I think we should be doing another survey based off just the feedback. And we're going to get those 2 quotes. I think I also want to look at expanding our scenarios also. So library and building and doing a bit of that work. So I would say if there's any comments from today to just maybe we can add a comment section in the next survey. So comments can be put in there. And then I think we have to plan maybe another touch base, maybe come back down and talk further about some outputs. So I think what we would do is send a memo, Kathy, to you and Fran, and that can be circulated. We have done the one major step that we need to do, which is you got council's support for the BCH application. So that's kind of like our immediate thing that we wanted to get done. If any other grant comes open, that will be the next thing we flag. So that would be a next immediate step.
Oh, sorry.
It's crazy.
It's finished. It's not a simple topic. It's as you talk about all of the different names in itself. So yes, I think we need to give some thought to today, answer some different questions and get together again. Because this is an ongoing project. And to tell you the truth, it's a beautiful spot up there. We need to put something on it. Philip.
This has come across my mind a few times today, but we've had lots of public engagement over this site. And I feel like we've left that and we're doing our own thing. So I'm just concerned that that's how it's going to be perceived in the public as well. That, they had lots of input and now council is just going to do whatever.
Well, and that's why our meeting today is open and they'll be able to have a look at this. Sonia does have a list of all the people that made comments, and we have taken those into our minds. But I think, again, if we're talking housing and we're trying to get the library in there, we can look at all those ideas as we actually start to build the building and what it can look like and what we can afford.
You just want to be aware that, it wasn't just a fun exercise. We
For sure
have to bring them along with us.
Well, and that's why it's a public meeting today. We had thought about a closed session for a training session, but we thought, no, this needs to be public. It needs to be televised. We have our housing committee here as well. So no, we did hear them. Some of the things that they've told us that they would like, we're going to look at whether or not we can afford to do it or make it happen. We'll see. Or the next council will see, because this isn't going to happen before November.
Maybe just kind of one kind of closing comment on our end here is that going through these pro formas and like doing the financial feasibility, we can tell that there is a project that works for the municipality and can be financed by the municipality, right? And provides housing and, can help with water and wastewater. We know that there's a Venn diagram here and there's something in the middle that works. And part of this initial process, including, doing the geotechnical, hydrogeological, doing the survey, the servicing evaluations, are to get a little bit more clarity about what that project looks like. But I think from what I'm understanding from council, and I think the general vibe of the group is that there's a desire for a project to happen, and that's the most important part. Because as long as there's not, we don't want to do it. Oh, we're not really sure if we even want to do anything at all. That's the hardest thing to overcome. So we're down the road. We're moving. It takes time. It takes years. Yeah.
Just one quick question. If we decided today to just put the property up for sale through an RFP process and accept any proposal that involves housing, right? How likely are we to get a developer? If we're tying our hands here with a 24 unit, but if we just said, come to us with your proposal for housing as is, whereas what's the likelihood we see any sort of developer interested in that kind of site?
I mean, I would have to look at MLS data, frankly, to look at what vacant land's selling for right now in hamlet settlement areas. But I don't know. I don't know.
And based on other projects you've seen, is that a course of action we could take before we start to invest all this time into research and all these studies? Put the RFP up, see if we get any responses. In the meantime, we can head down the path of looking at doing the project ourselves.
I would do an EOI, do an expression of interest. It's non-committal, and just go, we're interested in any and all parties who are interested in building something, partnering with someone and doing something, and just do a very general expression of interest. And you could incorporate into there a section of can you describe what you would need to be done or given to you, capital wise, in order for you to be able to do this. And I think that will provide a lot of input. You'll see a lot of the response level, I think, will be indicating. The industry as a whole is pretty slow right now. So there's not a lot of people selling off land. Everyone's just holding. So that's what we do see on the private side right now, is it's just a lot of hesitation about building until projects that are in construction are rented out and people can see what, because there has been a slump and there has been a decrease in some rental rates. So people are a little nervous, I would say, right now. But that's what I would do, is do an EOI. You could make it 30 days just to, template the response so it's easy. The more you can make a response easy, the more responses you'll get. You could do a multiple choice in there too, to just gain perspective. And so maybe someone doesn't even want to necessarily do a development there, but if they provide insightful information from a developer's perspective, that could also be I think a value too. So I would do an EOI.
But don't you think they will come back with the questions that we are going to be asking you to get the answers for? Is the studies of the geology, the wastewater, the septic and water?
I think it's to validate that that's what we think they need. Maybe, right?
And who would write this?
I mean, we could write the EOI and help draft that. I think it could be does not have to be complex. You've got a property map, you have some preliminary information that can be put together. But I think the idea of that is to validate. I mean, you could even put in the EOI, what do you think the township should do from a study perspective to help you, right, be able to take a project forward. I do suspect you're going to have the response saying, geotech, hydrogy, preliminary servicing brief, things like that. And then there's also going to be probably the request of capital. And I think that one will be important to be if people are saying, we need you to give us $500,000 in order to build this type of project as not as a grant, then you compare it to, okay, what equity do you need to bring if you build it yourself and maintain? You can start looking at that. But from what I see from rural and small municipalities is the land is never enough. There needs to be a grant that comes with that land on a per unit basis.
Or the services.
No, both. Even in Perth, the Halton Street property that they did the RFP for, I think 3 years ago, they needed the county to provide them 2.5 in order for them to take it. The land was free, but they needed 2.5 from them. Yeah.
So yeah, just
Only if you have simple ideas.
very simple. If we just build a splash pad there, it won't be an issue. No. So that was so based on those comments, that would be my suggestion to the housing committee that's spearheading this, is we have an opportunity here for very low risk. Just put feelers out there to see, first of all, are we heading down the right path? And maybe we don't get the 24 unit we want. Maybe someone proposes 5, but it costs the municipality nothing. And we can get ahead with the project and the municipality can kind of move on to the next project. That's just my advice, I guess.
Okay. Any other comments before we wrap this up? It's been a great conversation.
Kathy, like we are doing this. Thanks, Nick. We are doing this work as part of the FCM grant that we did. So I did take a few pictures just while everyone was filling out their phone. I would like a group picture because we want to submit. They asked for pictures of anything in these reports. So we'd like to just do a group picture today and send that off to them as well.
It'll cost you, but we'll do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But thanks to,
All right.
but thanks
Thank you.
to Lindsay and Nick for coming
For
down and
sure.
doing this. It's great working with you.
And I have a motion. And that is moved by Susan Irwin, seconded by Duncan McGregor, that the presentation by Lindsay Blair with 2B developments be received for information. All those in favor? Carried. All right. Unless there's something else, we have a motion to adjourn. Moved by Dan Meek, seconded by Bill Everett, that bylaw 2026-07 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special meeting of council held February the 11th, 2026, be read a first, second, and third time and finally pass this 11th day of February, 2026. And further, that this meeting be adjourned until Tuesday, February 24th at 6 p.m. for a regular meeting of council, said meeting to be held at the council chambers, 14216 Road 38, Charlotte Lake. All those in favor? Carried. We are adjourned.
Now she wants a picture.
There we go. It's picture time.
Gotta get a picture. You want to sign that?